Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. My name's Shay Douglas, and I am back with a clinical nurse consultant by the name of Dennis O'Connor. This guy, we've had some great conversations in the past. We've talked about terrain theory, germ theory. We've looked into mental illness, depression. We've opened up discussion on a huge range of topics, which you can find in the archive of Earth Heroes TV. And today we are going to look at one of the hot topics in our culture right now, particularly in Australia, as well as internationally, globally. This is something relevant for all of us, and it has to do with masks. And also we're going to dive deeper into understanding not just the impact that masks have, but how that impacts our environment, as well as our mental state, our psychological state, and also lastly, touching on the spiritual implications of the mask. And you might have many questions at this point, as do I, and we're going to open this conversation up with Dennis O'Connor. I just want to thank you for joining us in this live preview. We're going to cut it up into two parts. So this is going to be part one. Part two, we're going to do a little bit deeper on an uncensored platform. We're going to invite you in at the end. But first and foremost, Dennis, welcome back to another episode, mate. This is always good to have these conversations.
Good to see you, man. Even just listening to your intro, it just actually gets me frustrated. I hate to say. So I'll try not to rant on this, but even the fact that we have to break this discussion into two parts because my channel would get deplatformed, I find absolutely horrendous. And then we've also had this where we live at the moment. We've had masks kind of mandated, especially in some situations, and we're gonna have a look at whether there is rationale or whether there is any common sense behind that.
Well, it seems, there's this global pandemic that we're experiencing. Germs could be spread, so we've got to cover the germs, where the source is. It makes sense, right, to cover your face up and wear a mask?
Well, you would think that. And one of the analogies that I like to kind of throw out there is, and hopefully I don't offend too many people with this, is that, if you just look in a straight line, the Earth is obviously flat. So
Yeah,
are things always as they seem?
That's a good point. Not necessarily always. That's
yes,
a good point.
Absolutely. So I think one of the first, I've made a few notes here because there's just so many segues we can go into. But the way I split it up was the first part of it might be the physical domain, about how they affect us and how they actually work in a physical manner as well. And what we have to realize is that we have everything from cloth masks being suggested all the way through to what are called N95 masks. And remember, I used to work in a hospital. I used to work in theater settings. I worked in intensive care settings, so I had to wear masks. Okay.
And I thought that was, for the health implication reasons. I was going to touch on this a little bit later, but surely, like when you were as a nurse and you had to cover your face up, what was the main purpose of that?
The main purpose of that was to stop droplets falling into wounds and to stop splashes of things getting onto us.
It's very physically based.
Absolutely. And then you also have to be educated about how to wear masks properly.
They educate you on how to wear it properly. In case you wear it down
in
here,
case we're touching it,
there.
in case we're mobilizing it. We also take it off periodically, and we have to dispose of them after a certain period of time.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm looking around at the general public being told that they have to wear masks and there is no education going on behind it, essentially, I'm really quite baffled. So then what we do is we take it down from the mask with the tiniest little holes in it, which is your N95 mask, all the way down to the material masks, which we can wear. And what we have to understand is how tiny viruses are. Okay, so they are measured in these impossible increments that we need an electron microscope to look at. Okay?
So if I had a virus on my hand, I wouldn't be able to see it.
Far from it, absolutely far from it. But more to the point, with a cloth mask, there's an analogy that's thrown around quite a lot. A cloth mask to stop a virus is similar to a mosquito. You're trying to stop it to a chain link fence. Okay?
Understand.
So then we have this...
virtually impossible.
It's impossible. Absolutely.
Okay.
So then we have what sounds like a very rational explanation, the fact that a mask will stop droplets. Okay. But then we have to think about this a little bit further. We have we've got 40 odd years of peer-reviewed research in all sorts of high-level magazines that essentially tell us that masks are not effective in any way with spreading a virus. Okay. And even to the point where there were some studies that suggested that masks actually were useless, even in surgery. And you had a small cohort of surgeons that, for that reason, would not wear masks, even doing operations.
So they weren't worried about the splashback.
The empirical data suggested that this made no difference to outcome.
Right.
Which is quite incredible. So people don't realize that this information is actually available and it's actually out there.
So do you have any reference points, examples that we could share with the viewers on what might be relevant? And if they wanted to go further, we could drop that in the comments later. Or...
Yes, absolutely. I think we might do that in part two.
Nice.
And maybe just chuck a few links or put them in the description or something. Yeah, but there's a stack of research on this. Even what I find quite in trouble is the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, and the World Health Organization, previous to this year, had information telling us that masks were ineffective, and now that's been taken down. And what we're led to believe is that new research and new science totally turns our 40 years worth of science on its head, because what they've done is they've looked at airflow studies and the stopping of droplets. And there is an assumption and a correlation, not a causation, it hasn't been proven, that because we're stopping droplets, we are potentially stopping a virus. Okay? But if we actually look at aerosols, as compared to droplets, and we do our airflow tests on aerosols, we find that aerosols come out all around the mask, and you could actually argue that they can come out in a more upward direction and spread further and longer.
If they drop, but gravity pulls it down.
Absolutely. So there's actually quite valid arguments on the face of it about how illogical masks are.
Okay, right. And so could we flesh out a little bit more on the physical impacts that wearing masks has on the mass majority? It seems that without the proper education and training on how to utilize them in the most effective way, they can be essentially invalid or unuseful. And so what does it take? What are the other implications physically that the masks have on our physical body?
So people don't realize that carbon dioxide in water forms a thing called carbonic acid. This is your soda stream makers, essentially. Right. Okay, so it makes fluids more acidic. Now, if your airflow is being blocked, you are partially breathing carbon dioxide, which raises your pH which lowers your pH in your blood by a tiny measure, which makes your blood more acidic. And we have strong correlations which show that a more acidic environment in your body causes a whole host of health problems.
Right.
And we also have some studies that are suggesting that we have what is called hypoxia, which means low oxygen, and hypercapnia, which is high carbon dioxide, which may be associated with neurological changes. And some neurosurgeons are saying that these changes may be irreversible if prolonged.
Whoa, okay. Maybe we could tap into that psychological effects of those neuro pathways and what that, how that could impact us long term if something like this. Because the thing is, like here, Far North Queensland, they're mandating masks. Okay, no worries. Like if I have to just put it on to go and collect my food or just to walk to the table to have my dinner, and it's going to be done in 3 days, it seems like, that's a, reasonable task to ask out of us. However, what you're saying is that it's kind of useless if we don't know how to manage that, and if we're taking it off, putting it on and moving it around, and then it's kind of like, what is the impact this might have on us psychologically is my biggest concern if this is longer term than just 3 days. What if this is 3 months or 3 years or the rest of our culture?
Yeah, so many branches to go down with that, and I think what we have to do is a lot of people seem to, whether it's because they're paralyzed by fear, seem to just have lost that mechanism to be able to step back and critically think. And when we have, for example, if I'm standing at a bar and or a restaurant counter and I have to wear a mask, but then I can sit over here without a mask. The logic about how that is going to make any difference to anybody's health is absolutely beyond me. It's absolutely beyond me. And people don't realize we have lots of evidence of looking at viruses over decades. And we've papers from the 80s, the 90s that track coronaviruses starting in one continent and then after 2 or 3 months going to another continent. And the idea is that these guys get caught on airflows and can circulate around the world. So I'm kind of at a loss to see if you've got a viral particle that can travel around the world, how me wearing a mask at a counter and then sitting down and taking it off is going to do anything for viral spread.
Yeah, good point. So there seems to be a few like missing pieces here, but keeping it on the focus of mask.
Yep.
And really the impact that has on us as humans in these different areas of life, including our environment. What are some of these bigger impacts that, because what they're suggesting is that if you wear a mask, then you've got to chuck it away once you finish wearing it, right? And then you've got to get a new mask. So, or, you use the cloth mask and you wash it and you reuse it. So say, for example, 7.4 billion people in the world decided, yes, it's a good idea to wear a mask. How does that impact our environment?
So just from memory, and I might be a little bit off with my facts and figures because I'm always throwing these different things around in my head, but I think the figures are something like for masks being produced, there's something like 120 billion masks being made every month.
Wow.
And that equates roughly, again, I might be a bit off on the figures, to about 3 million masks being used a day. So, I mean, if you can kind of in any small way figure out the amount of resources that are going into that production, and those things are getting disposed of. Those things getting disposed of. And again, if we have this vector, which is one of the worst things that we've ever seen, which is killing people in their millions and millions and millions, I can't quite understand how I've got to be wearing this thing in front of my face to save my life and to make sure Granny doesn't get killed. But then after I take it off and it's heavily contaminated with all this stuff that's protected you and saved your life, I can just pick it up and throw it. And the disposal of this almost nuclear, radioactive piece of thing that was in front of my face, somebody else can just walk on and pick it up and chuck it in the bin. Anything can happen when it just goes in the rubbish tip or wherever. So there's a few little parts of this that I'm not really getting.
Yeah, me too. And just listening to you with the experience of being a clinical nurse consultant, it seems curious for me just to really unpack this a little bit further, because there has to be some rationale as to why they're mandating these masks. There must be. And
I'm going to stop you there, Shay, because I think that's something that we have to tackle in part 2. And I certainly have very strong views on why this is happening. And again, it's kind of with sadness that we've got to just break this into 2 parts essentially. And I'm not in a position as somebody who, I don't call myself, I kind of like to think of myself as somebody who can read research very well, can interpret and can deliver information from people who are far cleverer than me to people who don't know this stuff. And I've got about more than 20 years experience to back it up. So I feel it's a bit tragic that I have to actually censor myself, and we can't have a balanced discussion. And there's some other people, again, who are way more qualified than me, who have been deplatformed on channels like YouTube, who are not being allowed to deliver a narrative in the mainstream. And I've got very serious concerns about this.
Yeah, I'm hearing you. And so the biggest thing that we can take away from this without overexposing ourselves essentially is to maybe potentially look at the spiritual implications that mask may have on us, positive or negative, and how that potentially disconnects us from.
So I'm going to pose a rhetorical question to you, and Shay, I don't know, I'm sure people who know Shay knows that he is a breathwork coach, and he is actually a business coach, and he knows a lot of stuff about about some great psychology and how your body works and how it connects to things like abundance and spirituality. And I want to pose that question to you, who is very entrenched in that area, about the possible physical / psychological effects that may actually impact on spiritual growth, based on the concerns that I've expressed to you.
Thanks, Dennis. I appreciate that introduction. I just wanted to be clear that I actually know very little, and I'm actually learning so much tremendously every day, particularly in the space of this spiritual realm, which it crosses things physical, emotional, psychological, and goes beyond our comprehension of actually what we can see, taste, touch, smell, or feel. And it's way beyond actually my comprehension as a limited being. But what I do have trust in is that there is things within our field that potentially we can't see or hear, right? So we talk about the UV rays of light. Humans have only less than 1% ability to be able to see the spectrum, full spectrum of light that's available. We also have this limited capacity to hear certain sounds. We've got your beautiful dog with us here today, and if you had a dog whistle, it's likely the dog would pick it up, but we wouldn't, right? So we can accept that there is so much going on in this realm of our reality, and what is reality. And so for me, looking at the spiritual element of it is fascinating, because to have an awareness that there is, a connectedness between all physical elements, like a connectedness between you and I. There's something that connects us to the planet. There's something that connects us to the plants and the birds and the bees. Then how is it that masks are impacting us on a spiritual level and it's like this notion of, I guess for my answer for you would be to look at how we are potentially it's disconnecting us further from sharing our truth by connecting to our potential to see beyond the veils and the mask and the physical, that there is so much more going on a deeper level that is beyond our comprehension rationally.
So are you saying to a certain extent then that just outside of the physical thing that we can see with masks, there's so much more to our environment that we just can't perceive? And you're suggesting that apart from the things I'm talking about, there are things that are being blocked that are very vital for us to be connecting with each other potentially, and we may be damaging that beautiful, I guess, synergy that we have when we're together and when we're communicating. Would that be?
Absolutely, that's a great way to round it off. And
yeah,
I wanted to just touch on some of the science that's available today that I feel is really fundamental to our existence, which is knowing that what makes up the physical environment that we find ourselves in is 0.01%. And so if we look at the subatomic atom through quantum physics, then we know that we are mostly space. And that's really hard for a lot of people to comprehend, this notion that, this table is not physical. Like, this body is very physical. Yet when we really break it down to subtle energies, when we zoom in with a microscope into the sun, for example, which looks very physical, it gives us sunlight and heat and energy, and we zoom in so far, and we zoom in as far as we can, what do we see? A subatomic atom, the same subatomic atom that makes up our human physical flesh. And why is that relevant to talking about mass? Is because it seems that there is this mandate that we use this very physical object to cover up our face, which is how we are seen to the world, how we present ourselves to the world is very much through our face, because it's how we connect through our senses. It's where our eyes are located, our nose, our mouth, our ears. This is a central part of our physical being, right? As well as the sensory being, because what actually connects our consciousness, if we think about the consciousness being the intelligent source where we're able to connect to through stillness, and we experience the physical realm through these senses, then the masks are blocking that innate capacity to smell and to taste and to sense the world that we find ourselves in.
Would you suggest, and I know hopefully this is not a loaded question, I'm always conscious of not trying to lead people towards my conclusions with my questions, but I'm sure I kind of inadvertently do that. But would you suggest that the mask is a very big flag for fear, and being in a fear response would mitigate the stillness that you need to be able to connect to something greater than us? Could that be something that's relevant?
That's a great question, and there is relevance in that. And I guess to keep it accessible for all people is, at this situation, there's probably two main types of people. There's those who are choosing, I'm going to do the right thing here, and I'm just going to do and be obedient, do what they tell me to do, and wear a mask. And it's only to go to the shops, and I only have to do it when I'm going to dinner, and I'm just going to comply. Then there's another, type of person who's going to say, no, I'm certainly not going to do this because it's, potentially against my civil rights as a human being to choose how I present myself to the world. And so we also might find people in between who are not sure and actually don't know their own rights, don't know where they stand, and maybe are even also afraid of doing the right or the wrong thing, and stuck in this place where they're just surrendering and letting go and actually submitting and avoiding any confrontation or experience. And so with all of that, the connecting thread here is that it comes down to very much an individual decision. We can recognize that you're an individual person, I'm also an individual person, but what is the theme, the connecting thread that connects all of us here? And we have to recognize that we're all, if you're watching this, human being on this earth having a physical experience. Maybe you can recognize that there's some psychological, mental, emotional part of your existence in your body. And this whole idea of spirituality might be total kind of wacky woo-woo concept. But what I love about being in the world today is that the fact that we are living in one of the most significant times in human history as far as we know it. We can look back through history and see devastations of war and revolutions and a whole variety of different life-changing, culturally shifting, paradigm-changing experiences. Yet today we get to experience it on first hand. And what we're noticing is this cross path, this cross pollination of science, which is giving us the evidence-based, factual information, as well as this ancient wisdom that has come through the ages, being passed down, that enables us to look within ourselves for how we feel about the choices that are presented to us. And ultimately, I think this is a really key takeaway for us to look at within what is going on when presented with this mandate of wearing a mask. How does that make us feel? And to go on a little bit deeper, for me, if I share openly, initially that gave me a lot of anxiety. I didn't feel good about it. I didn't have those yay, really tingly, this is feeling amazing, joyful experiences. I was kind of like, whoa, that feels kind of, I don't know how to, navigate all of this. I'm feeling a little bit kind of extremely anxious, a little bit not sure how to deal with the confrontation, not sure what I should, because there's this fear, like fear of people are going to reject me or accept me, or both. No matter what side I choose, I'm likely going to be feared, rejected, and accepted by a certain group of people in both situations here. When fundamentally, if I know that we are all connected through these subatomic atoms, which makes up the majority of the universe, then I fundamentally know that we're all connected and we're all one. When it seems this choice is polarizing people and separating people, it's creating this deeper illusion that we are separate from one another, when it seems through doing the work, through journeying with sacred plant medicines, and through understanding and sitting in stillness, I've come to realize that we are all connected, in fact, and all parts of the human body are connected. There's not, it's not compartmentalized where we have, it's just the physical, then it's just the emotional, then it's just the psychological, but in fact it's all the same. And there are different areas to the body that make it function and has a purpose, but in fact it's all one.
Incredible load of stuff you covered there, and what I always feel is, I think one of my callings to a certain extent is to sometimes bridge that gap through my knowledge of the industry, the medical industry, towards what you're talking about. And it's quite incredible listening to you talk about that from just a belief and an experiential point of view. But for anybody watching this, I would like to kind of back up what you're saying, that there are a ton of experiments to actually, these are legitimate, proper experiments that actually validate what you're talking about, about that there is something outside of what we can experience and sense. And I also want to, I guess, tell you that I take note of what you're saying here about this divisiveness, that something so simple has created this division in our society. I'm guessing what you're saying is you are in the non-masker kind of group. I certainly am. And I find it incredibly offensive, this term anti-masker, incredibly offensive. If you asked me, would you like to marry me? And I say, no, Shay, it's okay. I'm not an anti-marriager. This is weaponization of vocabulary, and it's incredibly offensive, and it creates division. And I want to talk more about that in part 2.
Yeah, let's say that for part
because
2.
That's another rabbit hole we're going down. And the same with yourself. It is absolutely polarizing. And I think for us, we're usually, I mean, your Earth Heroes channel is a great example of just promoting something harmonious and something collective and something beautiful. And to have something that, you know, our great leaders, and I say that with a lot of sarcasm, are throwing onto us to create division, I have a lot of skepticism about why this is being done.
Interesting conversation to open up, and I'm really excited. I want to invite you guys. Thank you for watching and joining in with us. We are just having the conversation. We want to invite you to join us, and we're going to do a part 2 to this on Earth Heroes TV, which is a uncensored platform where you can view a whole variety of different topics from health, wellness, and we look at mostly self-care, people care, and earth care. They're the 3 main values that we really look at in the intentional videos that we create. And so you can do that in the description. You'll see the invite and the link to join. It is a 7-day free trial, and it's extremely affordable, only $19 a month, and it enables us to...
I'm going to put a little bit of pressure on you, man. But for my YouTube subscribers, can I give them a 30-day free?
Absolutely.
Whoa!
Absolutely. Yeah.
And also, I mean, you didn't mention, I'm surprised, but Shay has just completed a documentary movie, which has just gone live, and you can see that. And I'd love for you to have a few words about that.
Absolutely. Thanks, Dennis. So the idea with the film is to really empower people, to inspire people, and really bring people into a deeper sense of connection. And we've done that through the format of visual storytelling through this documentary, which really looks at what's going on globally and some of the challenges that we're faced with, from, you know, financial hardship that probably many small businesses are facing, the environmental impact. You know, we can see clearly that you know, you only need to look out to the beaches and into the oceans to see the amount of plastic and species that we're losing. We look at also the deeper levels of a social impact, how it impacts us socially as human beings, and to interact on a deeper felt sense level from feeling-based relating. And so instead of focusing on the solutions, the problems, we really focus on the solutions. And we cover a diverse range of different stories of people doing wonderful things. Yeah, we've had the opportunity to be Dr. Bruce Lipton. We've got Dr. Zach Bush on there, and some other phenomenal people, experts in their field, who cover just such tremendous value and insight. But ultimately, what they are all suggesting is that the journey begins within. It starts with each of us looking internally, having that moment of stillness, connecting to the higher intuitive knowing that comes from what we've talked about, where serotonin is created in the gut, and how what Dennis even relates to, you know, understanding the physiology to understand deeper elements to our spirituality as well. And there's definitely a connecting thread here. And I know for me, even at first, it seemed too simplified. You know, the world's problems that we're faced with are quite complex, and there's a lot of layers to it. And it didn't make that much sense to, you know, just suggest to someone that you've got to look within. What does that even mean to sit in meditation? And you know, there was a lot of resistance there for me. And so that's why I've been on the journey over the last years. It's taken us 2 years to make this film now, and really unpacking what it means to be a human in today's world, and how we can have a positive impact if we come into that deeper state of awareness. And what we're doing here in this conversation and through this series is to spread that awareness of what's going on in the world right now, and also in your local homes place, and just conversing en masse. You know, at first it may seem normal to just accept what's given to us, accept the mandate, accept what others say. Yet we all have the choice to move forward, and ultimately that's up to each of us as an individual what we choose to believe, and the power of belief in this instant is tremendous.
And I think it's really important that the best choices that we make are informed choices. And it's exceptionally important to broaden your knowledge if there is an area of contention, and then you can speak knowing both sides of something, as opposed to having a polarized idea of something and holding on to that. Now, when you get to that point of having a polarized belief, that's not knowledge based, that's faith based. It's not based on knowing the full picture. So this is why I get very excited to have these kind of arguments, because I believe that I can add much more substance to people, to help people to understand in a much broader way these kind of issues. And the mask issue does sound like something that should be very simple and straightforward, but believe me, it's not. And I think what a beautiful way to wrap up that, because we're going to take it much deeper, and I'm probably going to be venting a little bit.
Thanks for joining us in this chat. Just want to invite you as well, if you did like it, just leave us a little like. Write us a comment if you didn't like it, no problems. We'd love to hear your feedback. And if you want to get more videos like this, just click that little bell button to get notified for the next videos coming up. Otherwise, join us for part 2 on Earth Heroes TV, and we'll see you there, guys. Thanks so much, Dennis.
Awesome. Thanks, Shay.